Good morning, class. Today is a grammar lesson day. As we do it each week, we take one day and we set it aside for doing a grammar lesson. So you'll recall last week's lesson was about nouns and verbs, and that every sentence needs to have a noun and a verb. And a noun is right, person, place, or thing. And what does a verb do? It's an action word. That's correct. And so we're going to add one more type of word to a sentence. And the purpose of adding this word is that it adds more description. It adds some life or zest to your sentences. And why we're going to learn about adjectives is so that it increases your capacity to speak not just basic sentences, but to put a bit of life into it and give it a little zest and make your conversation interesting. And also, when you're writing, people will be able to visualize it more. So an adjective is a word that modifies or clarifies a noun. And the noun is person, place, or thing. And so when we add adjectives to a noun, we know that in most all cases, it goes before the noun. Now, as you know, I say that, and then I say but. And so, yes, there are exceptions. We're going to cover that in our next lesson. But for today, we're going to talk about what normally occurs. And so when we describe the noun, the adjective goes before it. So earlier we were talking about our weekend as we started up our class, and I asked some people about their weekend. Someone said it was a relaxing weekend. So the word relaxing described the weekend, which is a noun. So relaxing was the adjective. I heard someone else said they attended a great hockey game and the Wildcats won, which is always a good thing for us, right? And so great described the hockey game. And yet another one talked about the weather, and the weather was awesome. That is an adjective. It describes the weather. And so we have a variety of ways to describe things. And let's, for example, I can say that I have a red apple. So what's the adjective there? Red. And it describes the apple, because I could have had a Granny Smith apple, right? Which is green. I could have said the basic sentence, I have an apple. And so it would meet the need to have a noun and a verb. So actually there's two nouns, the pronoun I have an apple, and the apple is a noun. Doesn't tell you much, it just says apple. But when I say I have a red apple, then you can visualize this red apple. I can also add another word. So I have a big red apple. And you will see that big becomes the second adjective, separated from the red by a comma. But there's another little rule that I want you to remember. When you have two adjectives together, one talks about size, such as the word big, and the other is color. The size always comes first. And sort of a litmus test, as we will say, if you read the sentence and you say, I have red big apple, you know it doesn't sound very good. And it's kind of hard to read, right? Yes, John. So by always putting the size first and a comma, it will read correctly. So big, the size goes first, separated by a comma and a color red. Does anyone else want to give some examples? Heather, do you want to read a sentence off for us? Yes, and the adjective is? So Heather's sentence is, she went on a trip and visited the majestic mountains. And majestic is the modifier for the noun mountains, right? Anybody else want to give me an example? That's correct. The children went to the old schoolhouse. Schoolhouse is your noun. That's right, John. And old describes the schoolhouse, that it's old. So remember that the adjective always goes before the noun, which is a person, place, or thing. When you're using two adjectives together and one is size and one is color, which one comes first, Henry? Always the size, correctly. So now what we're going to do, we're going to pull out our tablets. And if you go to the folder for today's lesson, you will see that there's a reading page there. It's not very long. There are only 6 of us, so you can each take a turn reading the sentences. I think like a couple sentences each. And what we're going to do is we're going to listen as the person reads. We can follow on our books as well, on our tablets. And I want you to identify the adjectives, and I want you to connect them to the noun that they modify or describe. And so if each of us takes a turn reading and do that exercise, that will prepare us for doing our next step. So thank you, Sam, for reading that last sentence. And it seems you all really have a good feel or understanding of that exercise. So what I now are going to ask you to do is to take the exercise that's on the corner of your desk, and you'll see there's blank spaces. Oh no, that's the old exercise, just an extra copy. Just turn that over, and there you'll have today's assignment. Pat. Okay. So in part A, you will see there's sentences with a blank, and next to them is a little short column. There's about 4 or 5 words for each one, and I want you to look at the word in the column next to that sentence. Only those. That's right, Robert. Only the words next to that sentence, and pick out the right word being the adjective. Because you'll see the blank is in front of a noun, so you need to pick out the right adjective. So I want you to work through those sentences. And then what I want you to do in part B, you'll see that there's a sentence with a blank. There's a noun after the blank. So you know we're looking for adjectives that go before. But this time I want you to pick your own adjective. So go through that last part B. There's like 6 questions there. Blank statements, and I want you to fill in those lines, and then we're going to discuss them and share with each other. I want you to keep in mind the word that it's modifying. That should help you to find some really good adjectives, and let's see how you do on that. Okay, so I'm going to give you, let's say, how about 10 to 15 minutes. You should be able to fill in those blanks after we went through the reading exercise. You seem to do very well, and so I don't think it should pose any problems. But if it does, I'm going to walk around the room while you're working and just give me the high sign, and I'll step over and give you a hand. Anyone have any questions? Robert? No, there's not going to be any homework.